It is Sunday, May 25th, 2025, and some good news this Sunday morning. The worst show on television, The View, on the chopping block as their ratings collapse. They are in free fall. Shows in the same time block airing on cable, not broadcast, on cable, beating The View. Unheard of. We're going to show you also Trump's big, beautiful bill facing a new major hurdle in the U.S. Senate as hardline conservatives demand unrealistic spending cuts. We'll explain what's happening. And Elon Musk having enough, leaving Doge, returning to his role as CEO at X, Tesla, and SpaceX, and why this is just so unfortunate. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So President Trump has been on a tear over the last 124 days, scalping his media enemies, going one after the next. In December, Trump winning that massive defamation suit that he brought against ABC News, the beginning of a slew of legal victories for Donald Trump, suing ABC News for defamation after George Stephanopoulos, one of their main primetime anchors, slandered and defamed him, saying on air inaccurately that Trump was found liable for rape, which wasn't true, and he knew it wasn't true. ABC settling that lawsuit in December, agreeing to pay out $15 million. Then a few weeks ago, reporting that CBS was preparing to settle with President Trump in his, get this, $20 billion lawsuit around CBS News' 60 Minutes segment, deceptively editing that Kamala Harris interview before the election. CBS even forcing out leadership at the network because of this suit. The longtime executive producer over there leaving the company. That's what Trump's been up to privately. All private.
No good. NBC is no good. They're no good. ABC is no good. CBS is no good. And in fact, in honor of you, I just sued CBS today because of 60 Minutes.
Then, using his presidential power, his executive power, he's done a whole bunch of other stuff, pausing all federal funding to state media like PBS and NPR because of media bias and good riddance. Trump's FCC last month opening an investigation into NBC around the company's DEI practices, if they're illegally hiring people based on race and gender, or rather, if they're not hiring a group of people because they have the wrong race or gender. But the biggest, the most profound media enemy is ABC's The View, who is now reportedly on the chopping block. This would be the ultimate media victory for President Trump. The View, the show that's sole purpose is to bash and hate on Donald Trump.
He's only been in office for 6 weeks. Seems like 6 years, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And he's been going around with his cronies touting his so-called landslide and blowout win. But he won the popular vote by 1.5%, one of the smallest ever, and he won the general election by less than 50%. So what kind of mandate is this really?
Well, it is a mandate, and I'm going to explain why. And I don't mind the question, but let me be very clear. I'm no supporter of Trump. I'm a supporter of truth and the facts. And here's the facts. The man won every swing state. He increased in terms of his voter turnout in his favor from the standpoint of blacks, Latinos, and young voters. He increased his numbers in that regard from 2020.
The View, which, by the way, was the most watched show during the 2024 election season, now in full ratings collapse, losing to Harris Faulkner at Fox News. Harris Faulkner has a show on Fox at the same time as The View, beating the ladies over there at The View, which is stunning, considering Fox is cable television, which means you have to pay for Fox News. It's like unheard of. The Faulkner Focus closing out last month with an average a total of 2.552 million views, beating The View, who averaged only 2.508 million viewers. A cable show beating broadcast television is wild. Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, who owns The View, reportedly telling management over there to cut the Trump bashing or risk losing your show. That's right, your numbers are terrible. Nobody wants to see you Trump bash all day long. At least during the election season, they had guests like Don Jr. come on to make the case and make it entertaining. Probably the most memorable episode, actually, of The View. Don Jr. calling out Joy Behar for wearing blackface, telling Whoopi she excused Roman Polanski's disgusting crimes against children. Fireworks. Remember this?
A pair that can take whatever heat comes towards you.
I promise you, my father's got a pair, and no sitting president has taken the heat that Donald Trump has
taken. That is bulldog. Yes. Stop. Go, Joy.
Okay. Just to her point, he also called Mexicans rapists. He made.
He
Wait a
said
second.
that some coming across the border, and that's a fact. Look at what's going on at the border.
Let her finish.
Called some Mexicans rapists. He attacked the handicapped. He bragged about it. Listen, we heard the access. Hold on. We heard the access tape where he bragged about grabbing women by their genitalia. She's talking about, that's what Megyn is talking about. She's talking about lowering the discourse to his level, which is horrible for this country. Even if people are working, we don't want to have a country like that. Do you understand that?
We've all
they don't
done
like
things.
The vessel or the semantics of the tweets, but nevertheless, look at the result.
We've all done things that we regret. I mean, if we're talking about bringing a discourse down, Joy, you've worn blackface. Whoopi,
no,
you said that Roman Polanski.
I'm sorry, and don't.
You said that Roman Polanski, it wasn't rape when he raped a child. So let's talk about.
Let's talk about this. So you want to bring this up? The question came up.
I did not go in blackface, please.
No, she was not in blackface.
Thank you.
Sorry. Listen, being black, I recognize blackface. This I can say. Okay? I know it when I see it.
Back me up on that.
So now that you've broken this piece of ice, because I guess this is the fight you wanted.
It's not the fight I want.
Yeah, it is.
But if we're talking about character, if we're talking about these things.
Are you questioning my character?
I'm not questioning your character. I'm talking about you're questioning my father's character.
I'm sorry. I didn't question anybody. I simply said that when you're talking about that your father's taken more heat than anybody else, that is not so. Instead,
as a president,
as a president,
yes, ridiculous.
He's getting pressed.
I think the Central Park 5 took a lot more heat than your father has taken at his hand.
Name a president who's taken more heat than my father.
Everybody stop. Hold up.
President Trump.
We'll be right back.
In another story, Trump's big, beautiful bill facing major backlash in the Senate, not only from Dems, but from Republicans as well, from the far right flank, the fiscal hawks, who were saying this bill is a debt time bomb, which they say about every budget bill, but the good outweighs the bad with this in a big way. It locks in Trump's 2017 tax cuts. It eliminates tax on tips on overtime, something he campaigned on, promised to do. This does it, and it cuts $1.5 trillion in federal spending over the next 10 years. Senator Ron Johnson taking lead on explaining to the American people why this budget bill is the big, beautiful bill, why the spending cuts in it are basically nothing. They're basically a rounding error, he says. Watch.
Nothing but support for what President Trump is trying to do. I love the way he's acting boldly and swiftly, decisively to fix the enormous messes left by the Biden administration. So, from my standpoint, this is a budget reconciliation process, so we ought to talk about numbers. One of my disappointments with what the House process is about, the only number we ever heard about was $1.5 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but it's only $150 billion per year. And this is put in context of the fact that in 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. This year we'll spend over $7 trillion. $150 billion on that is basically a rounding error.
Yeah, you're talking about
the spending cuts. So we need to get serious about this. We need to establish goals. Listen, this is the weekend we honor the service and sacrifice of the finest among us. More than 1 million that died to defend this nation. I don't think they served and sacrificed to leave our children completely mortgaged, their future and their prospects diminished because of it. So we need to be responsible. The first goal of our budget reconciliation process should be to reduce the deficit. This actually increases it. But let me describe the mess. President Obama averaged about $910 billion of deficits per year. President Trump in his first 3 years averaged about 810. Then COVID hit, over $3 trillion in deficit. It should have ended there. We should have immediately returned to a pre-pandemic level spending, but President Biden averaged $1.9 trillion of deficits over his 4 years. And according to CBO, Those deficits now average $2.2 trillion over the next 10 years. We'll add $22 trillion. And I'm sorry, the House bill would probably add, I've calculated $4 trillion. You're saying you have these independent analysts saying it's 3.3 to 4 trillion. I agree with that. We have to reduce the deficit. And so we need to focus on spending. So you don't defeat the deep state by funding it.
And look, I'm as fiscally conservative as they come, but this is politics. You'll never get everything you want in a bill like this. Politics is a compromise game. It's about making a deal. Senator Ron Johnson says we should return to spending levels from 2019. Well, that's basically what this bill does. It's a bit over, but what's different about 2019 to today is we have $750 billion a year more in interest expense today. Let me say that again. Since Trump's first term, since 2019, the annual interest expense has increased by $750 billion. Not million, $750 billion, almost $1 trillion a year in more interest expense. You can see it here. Look at this chart. Look what happened after COVID, after the Biden administration. They just kept spending at these COVID levels. Look at where the interest expense was prior to COVID. For years, only around $250 billion a year is what our country owed to pay all of the money that people were lending them in treasury bills and notes. It's now $1 trillion a year. It's insane. Almost like they were purposely trying to bankrupt this country. This bill, it reins in some of that extra spending, but beyond that, it's all grandstanding because nobody wants to really fix the problem. Nobody's going to touch entitlements, not really. But even more importantly, because look, Congress, they had a chance to fix this not so long ago. They could have chosen to codify DOGE into law and the DOGE cuts into law, but they refused. This story, severely underreported. Elon tried. He brought them the cuts that needed to be made. He told them what he needed to get this job done, and they refused. The Republican Congress refused, which is why Elon Musk has now stepped away from DOGE completely, announcing he has returned to run his companies SpaceX, Tesla, and X full-time. David Sachs, Trump's AI czar, explaining it best, saying that this bill, look, it's as good as it gets on spending. If you don't pass it, you'd end up presiding over the largest tax increase in decades. How will that work out for Republicans in the midterms? Watch.
Now, to Tomas' point, will this bill be bad for the Republicans' prospects in the midterms? I guess what I would say to that is, I don't understand how you expect to do well in midterms if Republicans preside over the largest tax increase in decades. A tax increase that Joe Biden tried to get during his administration. Biden tried to raise taxes and couldn't get the votes for it. But if we don't make those tax cuts permanent, if we allow the sunset to happen, then you will accomplish what Joe Biden could not, which is to raise taxes on the American people. So look, no bill like this that's passed by a 1-vote margin on straight party lines when you only have a 3-vote margin in the entire House is going to satisfy everyone.
Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Ron Johnson's right? Do you think we'd ever get real spending cuts like that? A lot of the problem has to do with that $750 billion, which is just now baked into the cake. We have to pay off that debt. There's nothing we can do about that. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.